Hey, it's Don with the Nearly Historical Railroad channel, and today's video is a little bit different. I'm sitting out on my dad's driveway in front of his house. I'm waiting for someone to show up because we're going to show him the train layout. Actually, a couple people. But this video is going to be a little different. It's kind of special for us because we also have somebody else that's out here to take a look at our train layout, and it's really cool to have them because with the standard gauge layout, they actually used to work on the layout and run trains on it a long time ago. So he's going to tell us some history and stuff of the layout that I don't even know about. So it's going to be kind of neat. So, you know, stick around and let's see how this goes. So, oh, wait. I think they're here. We gotta go get ready. So it's the there's no water in that. It's the National In-Scale Convention of 2023, and we got to be on the layout tour part of that convention. So that's kind of cool. So we actually had like 4 busloads of people that are showing up today. So that's why we're kind of doing this right now. And then we'll also get to our special guest that also flew out from Southern California to not only go to the convention, but also to see this layout. So, yeah, let's just continue on with this. All right. Okay, so all the crowds have left from the from the N-Gauge convention. So they're all gone now, but we have one person left here, like I said, that came up from California earlier. Let me tell you this real quick though. So this side of the layout is kind of all of our narrow gauge whatnot, and over here is our standard gauge part of the layout. That back there is a mix of both. And then there's other dual gauge over there and whatever else over there. So what's cool is it's all interconnected now. And so you can run trains between them. You can load cattle up on the narrow gauge, transfer them over there to the standard gauge, bring them over here onto the narrow gauge, get them over there, make hamburgers out of them over there. So it's all interconnected. So that's really cool. But what I want to focus on right now is the standard gauge layout. So like I said, we actually got this layout like 9 years ago from somewhere else. It came from Downey, California. And so we've been working on it since then and adding on to it, repairing it, changing it over to DCC and all that type of stuff. But the person that's come out today that came to the convention, and also he's staying here at the house with us, is a guy that actually used to work on this layout and ran trains on this standard gauge layout back even like when it was started back in the like late 60s. So what's cool is he's gonna go through and kind of show us some different areas and kind of explain some of the history of the different areas. And we all know that train layouts change over time. and so he's gonna kind of tell us stuff that has what things used to be or whatever, and just about the people that used to work on the train layout and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of special that he's here. So anyways, this is John.
So thanks, Don, for the glowing introduction. So I got involved with this layout with some friends I used to live next door to in Los Angeles when we were youngsters. And we moved out to Lakewood and they moved to Downey in the mid-60s. I ran into one of the guys at Mawalex Music City in 1969, and he gave me his address and phone number, and I went over and visited, and this layout was there, and I've been going over there ever since, up until the family had all passed away. At that time is when the layout actually was moved up here to Sparks, Nevada. So the layout has gone through a number of changes throughout the 70s when I was there a lot. We used to all get together on Friday or Saturday nights. We'd be out here running trains till 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, listening to music, listening to Dr. Menno, drinking RC Cola, eating black licorice. We had so much fun, and this went on for years and years and years. And the number of people that used to come over and visit with us, it was just a huge number of friends that we all made. And we all had a great time. Some of them, my friend John Huey, Carlos Gasparini, George Milo, Joe Shine, and Mark Belinsky, Joe D'Elia. I mean, the number of people, it just went on and on and on. And we had so much fun. We didn't like going home, but we were just so tired we had to. Some of us had families we had to go to anyway. But the layout itself was a great meeting place for us to get together and do the thing that we loved. So this layout's gone through a lot of changes, and we're going to start with Main Street. So this part of Main Street over here has not changed. This has been here from the very beginning. These three buildings and the street lights. This was added on many years later. And they also changed the park. I know that the crossing guard signals here have changed. I remember sometime in the late 70s, Richard built the little police station here. None of this was there. This has all been added since it's come up here to Nevada. This has been moved because at one time, those grain silos that are now against the wall used to be here. But they've been moved because it kind of blocked the view of the rest of the layout. And a lot of this was added in the 80s. This park was from the very beginning, and this is an old Athearn steam engine that Athearn only made back in the 60s for a short time. And Dennis found one somewhere in a hobby shop somewhere, and it never ran, but he wanted to have it as a park. This is really the only street that was on the layout. That ran in front of the layout, and then went down underneath here. There's a bridge for the tracks, and ran up along the side over here. And now the shots that you're seeing now, this area of the layout had been changed at least 3 times, maybe 4. It's gone through a lot of changes. Some of them were a real nightmare to create. All right, so this part of the layout has seen many, many changes. And originally, this entire thing was flat. This track didn't exist. This building over here wasn't there. This was an oil refinery right here, a really big one. And then Richard also put a little power plant. It was kind of like one of those little stations, a local station, a little building with a bunch of towers coming out of it. And then over in that area was an orange orchard with a track, this track that went down there, and it actually made it a complete loop all the way around and became a reversing loop but it also had some sidings going off of it to go to the couple of packing house buildings that were down there. They used that for their Pacific Fruit Express area where they had all the 57-foot reefers and that type of thing. And then they decided to put something else there, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but the third thing they put was the cement plant that's there now. And instead of tearing up all the track, they just built that platform over the top of the track. And underneath that, it's all still there. So in 1974, the three of us, the two brothers that owned this layout and I, went on a road trip. And it was Memorial Day weekend. We went all the way up to the Keddie Wye. We made many stops on the way, but ultimately ended up at the Keddie Wye. And Dennis loved it. And all of a sudden, the layout changed. They dug this gorge. They tore this out. They added this bridge, which is kind of a representation of one of the legs of the Keddie Wye, but it does actually form a Y right here. The bridge you see down there, that bridge wasn't there. They added that. And this track down on the bottom is what goes down to the lower yard, which used to be covered. They opened it up, put in the tunnels, added various scenery to it to kind of represent the river that ran under the Keddie Wye, the Feather River. But they left the highway. So this area where the diesel facility is, used to be a roundhouse with a turntable here. And underneath the layout, you can see where the turntable used to be. They took that out because they were not running steam engines anymore. They had a lot of them at one time, like an AC9 cab forward, GS4, and so on, because they were really heavy into Southern Pacific. After we did the trip to the Keddie Wye, all of a sudden everything became Western Pacific and Burlington Northern. And they took the roundhouse out. Hey, wait a minute. What's this track over here? That was never there.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, we kind of added that.
You didn't call and ask.
Well, it was necessary.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I have to live with it. So anyway, the diesel facility went in. They put in this diesel engine house here, and this sign that's on top of this. Since they kept switching railroads, they kept making new signs, but they never destroyed the old ones. So all three of those signs are still here. All right, so this was another major change that they did in the layout, but this one was many, many years later. I believe it might have been in the early 90s when they changed this. This was all open right here. And it was a bridge that went across here. These tracks that go into the tunnel actually went underneath that bridge and then turned around and then came back out here on this track. Then they decided to close this all in because they wanted to have this road come up here. They added the fire station, grade crossing, and I guess the lumberyard, although I can't remember if this was their lumberyard or if it's changed over the years. Then they also made some major changes on what they call the High Line. This track, it crossed over here, and then it also had a crossover going back. This track takes off here and went up, wrapped all the way around that direction, came back underneath the tunnel, came out this track, back down around that side again, back up across that bridge, and then into that tunnel on the far side. Then it would just go around the reversing loop and come back. It was an 18-inch radius, and they had nothing but problems with it. Constant derailments, it was hard to get in there and clean track. So they decided to abandon it, and over around that side where the retaining wall is, they put in a rock slide across the tracks and never ran a train up there again.
So I'm just going to jump in here for a second and say that when we got the layout, yes, that rock slide was in place. There was weeds all the way down the track. There was no way you were going to run a train through there. And we decided, you know what? Let's bring this thing back to life. So we cleared the rock slide, cleared the weeds and the brush, fixed up the track a little bit, and we started running trains. And guess what? We had problems with the reverse loop. So of course we right. So eventually, then this may or may not be on the videos, I don't know, but we tore the reverse loop out and we just kind of split the track, brought it back together over there, and now we don't have to deal with that problem anymore. So yeah, so it's kind of nice to have the High Line, you know, back in operation. So, and we can actually run most stuff through it. There's a couple locomotives that don't like it. Still a little sharp, but it's all right. So, yeah.
All right, so to go a little further in this section, when I met the Dawkins, they lived next door to my grandmother in Los Angeles, and I met them in 1962. And they had a layout in the attic of their house, which they didn't get to use much because it was so unbelievably hot up there in the summertime. Everything was brass track. It was all high F drives from Athearn, which was a rubber band drive, and the rubber bands would just deteriorate during the summer. So when it finally cooled off, they had to pull all their locomotives out of the attic, take them all apart and put all new rubber bands on everything, and then go up there with Bright Boys and scrub all that brass track. So when they finally moved to Downey and they took that layout apart, they salvaged a few things, and one of the things that they salvaged out of that layout was this bridge. And this bridge is made out of paper. And when people look at it, when you first glance at it, it looks like it's a really nice plastic bridge. But when you get up really close, you can see that it's just embossed paper all glued together.
So since we're looking at this part too, this whole upper half has changed because when we picked the layout up, from the bottom of the layout to the top, that was too tall to turn sideways and fit through the doorway. So we just cut the whole top half of the mountain off and left it. So we've kind of rebuilt all this. And so all this up here, we built this town, which we still haven't named yet. But we have lots of suggestions from a while ago. So we built that. That mine up there is actually from the narrow gauge layout. Yeah, so we just kind of added all that up into there. So.
And the people that live in Downey called and complained about us leaving a half of a mountain in their backyard.
Oops, I didn't know that.
So sometime in the early 70s, they decided they didn't have enough yard space. So they decided to build a large staging yard under the layout. But they built it in a garage, and then they brought it out here in one piece, slid it underneath the layout, snaked it around the legs, and brought it into this area down here. And the only way you can see it is to get down on your knees or sit on a really short stool. Okay, so the lower yard goes all the way back, and you can see that there's a board over the top of it that has been added since then. But in the very back, there were little light bulbs in the center of the track pointing up, and then there was a little mirror above that light. And when they backed the train in, the train would block that red light bulb, and the light would disappear, and they knew that they had reached the end of the track. Long haul down to the lower yard, it was not working quite the way they wanted to, because they had to either back the train down or they had to bring the train in, cut the locomotive off, and then do a runaround track, which I don't think exists anymore. So instead, they put in this reversing loop. So the train would come down here, it would wrap all the way around, come back over here, they would go back out on the part of the track that would come back up to the main part of the layout, and then they would back it into one of these stub end tracks till they hit the Keddie magnet, cut it off. Then they decided they wanted to add a place for the locomotives to be stored. For the reverse loop part of the staging yard, you couldn't really see much what was going on underneath unless you were under there. So Dennis got this bright idea of building a diorama. So they took out the board that was here hiding this and built a diorama. So when he was running a train in the reverse loop, people that were standing out here watching the trains run around, they could see a train run through that diorama. So shortly after they added the reversing loop and the little bit of a yard that was over there, they added the diesel facility or diesel storage down here, because they didn't want to run the locomotives all the way back up to the top of the layout. Besides, the diesel facility was always full. So they added this, and they actually cut this into several blocks. So they could pull a locomotive up, put it in the little block, shut it off, pull another one up behind it, shut it off. This was back in, again, the 70s when there was no such thing as DCC. Everything had to be block control. Well, they wanted another yard. So they continued on down that direction and added the intermodal yard, which is down the other end of the layout. All right, so to get down to the lower yard, they added a turnout here. At one time, this used to be a three-way turnout, and then off of this track, this would turn off here and go down this grade, and then wrap around and come, we'd go all the way down there and then swing around and come across the little bridge down here in the gorge. But the main thing was about this ramp was people are always complaining about 1 or 2% grades on their layout. This is 4.5%, and they never had any problems with it. So when they first built the layout, they built this control panel, and this is a very, very basic operation control panel for DC. There are turnout controls, there were AB switches to operate the 2 cabs for every block, and then there were block direction switches. So you would switch them back and forth, and you had to do that because without knowing, you could actually turn a train around on this layout in 4 different places and not realize that that's what you did. Because all the reversing loops that are in here are actually integrated into the layout itself as part of the paths that you would run. And a good example is over here with the train coming across this bridge going that way, or if it went across and went through this yard this way and loop around this way, and then another reversing loop that went up along the top and around the back. And all of that is depicted on this layout of the paths. And there's that pesky track again that I don't remember being here.
Oh, we needed it to be able to convert stuff to DCC.
Oh, picky, picky, picky. All right, so this corner of the layout had gone through a few minor changes, but you got to remember that this side was against the wall and this side was against the wall, so this was a corner here. So what they originally had was a mountain that went up fairly high, but they got tired of not being able to see their trains, so they shortened the mountain. But they still had a tunnel here and here, and it had the tunnel here and over there for this lower track. This lower track, believe it or not, is a 24-inch radius. It goes underneath here. Now they had a problem with clearances. There's not much space between this lower track and the track that goes over the top of it. So when they started running container trains, when those started becoming very prolific in the railroads, there was not enough clearance for a double stack. So Richard would glue the 2 containers together and then cut the bottom off of the bottom container and put it in the well so it would clear the tunnels and the bridge. So back to the early 70s when this was oil refinery and the power station, there used to be one of those natural gas tanks, so really big tanks that used to sit here, you know, with the skeleton outside frame. I think they were called regulators or something like that. I can't remember what they were really called. But we made those out of a 3-gallon Baskin Robbins ice cream container. We would take it, rip the bottom out, and then glue the bottom in upside down so it domed this way instead of this way. And then we used a bunch of basswood that was H channels for the verticals and crisscross spacing, and it looked pretty good for something built like that. This Monolith station over here, the Monolith cement plant, we used to go to Tehachapi a lot. And on the way to Tehachapi on the 58, we drove past an area called Monolith. And we used to go up real close to the plant and take pictures and watch trains and do its thing. And then one day Dennis decided he wanted a cement plant. Him and his father started building this and called it Monolith, even though it's not anywhere near scale or as big as the actual Monolith plant. It's a representation of it, and it's a layout. Okay, so the boys really liked desert scenes, but they didn't have any on the layout. So one day John Huey came down and he decided he was going to do all the scenery work in this particular area. So he did all the rock and gravel and made this whole area look like a really nice desert scene. So when I came back here at the beginning of this week and I saw the layout, it all came back to me. And I'm thrilled to death to be here. And this is a living tribute, the fact that they salvaged this layout and it didn't get destroyed, to Gerald Dawkin, the father, Richard Dawkin, the older brother, Dennis Dawkin, the younger brother. Gerald built all the wood structures, did most of the track work, and he did all of the wiring. Dennis did painting, building kits, and decaling, and Richard built all the buildings. That's the kind of stuff that they love doing, and between the three of them, they had all of the skills to build the layout that you see and make the changes over the years for all of us and our friends to enjoy.
Wait, am I on frame there? I think
No,
I am.
Oh, we'll be on frame.
Oh, yeah.
Frame, frame. Oh, no, not again.
All right, so so anyways, it's been super cool to have John come out here. Like I said, he's been watching the videos and everything, but he hasn't actually seen the layout in person since we got it. And it's just been kind of an honor that we've been able to get this and work on it and upgrade it. It's definitely had a lot of challenges because as you know, it's been here since the 60s. So a lot of crazy wiring and stuff we've, replaced and upgraded. And again, we've, added stuff to it, changed it. So it's been a lot of fun. It was neat to be able to integrate it with everything else in this room. So we thank you for helping us chop it up and bring it up here and all that type of stuff.
You're very welcome, and thank you for salvaging it.
Right?
Well, we thank you for all the information that we didn't really know on this layout.
Yeah, well, you don't know how much of it I made up, so.
Yeah, that's
No,
true
come on,
too.
don't tell everybody
No, I didn't make any of it up. That wouldn't be right.
And then it's cool too that we have, our other John that lives here in town and Jim and Scott and those guys, they also get to enjoy it as well. So that's been a lot of fun. So anyways, thanks for watching. See you next time a video comes out. And hope you enjoyed this. It was a little different. Go ahead and subscribe and hit the little like button and all that stuff. Okay.
And keep watching, you never know if I'll ever show up again.
Right,
There's
there's
that
some
too.
days.
All right, goodbye.
Thank you.